A Juneteenth flag raising event downtown today as Mayor Johnson announcing plans for a reparations task force.
That group will study how policies have harmed Black Chicagoans in the past and present and make a number of recommendations for remedies. Paris Schutz says the latest on how Mayor Johnson wants to provide remedy for the descendants of slavery and Jim Crow era oppression. Paris?
Yeah, Terrence and Sylvia, Chicago would become the second largest U.S. city after Los Angeles to study reparations for Black residents. And Johnson's executive order begins with an apology on behalf of the city for the historical wrongs committed to Black Chicagoans and their ancestors.
Reparations will be an investment in our neighborhoods and our people. Reparations will unlock the doors for prosperity to fully flow through the neighborhoods that have been disinvested in for decades. And as we grapple with the challenges and the hard-fought victories to get to this point, we must never forget our goal to make sure that reparations become a reality for Black residents of this city.
So this executive order creates a reparations task force that will create a definition and framework for reparations, identify areas for restorative action like in housing, jobs, education, criminal justice. It'll conduct a comprehensive study of the harmful policies that have contributed to segregation and poverty in Chicago. So think about things like housing discrimination, redlining, and the construction of interstates that divided neighborhoods, etc. And finally, it will make recommendations to the mayor and city council for action. The mayor has pledged $500,000 for this effort in the current city budget. No word on whether the study will come up with a funding source to provide resources for reparations. 38th Ward Alderman Nick Spazzato acknowledges the evils of slavery, but says he believes this task force is questionable.
All right, guys, so we got to talk about woke Mayor Brandon Johnson, who is desperate because his approval rating, like Biden and like the rest of the Democrat Party, is in the tank, okay? This guy is in over his skis when it comes to being mayor of Chicago, okay? He literally can't handle it. Apparently, the guy goes to the hospital with panic attacks over the fact that his job is too stressful. At least that is the rumor. And we also know that Brandon Johnson is in hot water with the Black community of Chicago because this guy put illegal immigrants in their neighborhood, right? Something that he literally campaigned on, okay? And it blows my mind that people voted for this guy. The Black community in Chicago literally voted for Brandon Johnson. Without them, Brandon Johnson would not have been mayor. But again, these people are the main ones that are mad about what Brandon Johnson is doing, even though they voted for it, okay? So again, it's a very fascinating situation to analyze and observe. But what I do know is that Brandon Johnson is desperate to win them back, okay? And you know this because he's rolling out the oldest trick in the book when it comes to trying to win over Black people, which is to offer some type of government handout in exchange for votes, okay? And also throw a little race hustle in there. And hey, this is the most effective way to corral the Black community and to get them to vote for you, right? I'm telling you, it is by far the most effective strategy. And this is what Brandon Johnson is pulling out here, as he is going to spend $500,000 studying reparations, aka this is going to be a handout to one of Brandon Johnson's friends, okay, his buddies, his associates, his comrades, okay, that's going to make a quick buck off of Brandon Johnson trying to dangle the carrot of reparations above Black people to say, oh, this is why you should vote for me. See, I got your reparations, right? Here it is, it's right here. Jump for it, right? This is what he's going to do, right? They do this. This is the oldest trick in the book. They pull this out in California, right? It is really fascinating how Democrats get so desperate to preserve their victimhood coalition, okay? They will resort to these types of cheap tricks, because that's what this is, in order to get votes, okay? When they are failing at their jobs, they default to, well, hey, since we can't change your mind that we're doing a terrible job, if you vote for me, we'll give you a handout, okay? And we'll do it based off race, right? This is what they do, okay? And this is what Brandon Johnson is proposing, because now, according to him, all the problems in Chicago are not because of progressive or Democrat policies. No, it's because of racism. Racism is the cause of all of Chicago's problems, and that is why he's going to spend $500,000 studying reparations.
Chicago still bears the scars of systemic racism and injustices that have been inflicted on our communities. We've seen them in highways that cut through black neighborhoods and the industries, of course, that flock to these neighborhoods, often contributing to increased pollution and poor health outcomes. We see it in the trauma, of course, that is caused by gun violence. But we also saw it firsthand with the gross disinvestment that was intentional by previous administrations. And so beautiful neighborhoods like mine, the Austin neighborhood, has seen many health disparities, the lack of nutritious food, the lack of employment opportunity. The disinvestment in our communities have been intentional. And of course, that's why it's imperative that it is now the time to deliver good on reparations for people of Chicago, and particularly black people of the city of Chicago. Because even as I stand here today as mayor, the legacy of slavery and the aftermath still echoes today. We saw it when previous administrations sold off public assets. We saw the harm when previous administrations closed black schools and they shut down public housing, when they raided the pensions, these anti-black, anti-business endeavors that have caused tremendous harm and pain. But it's a new day. In fact, we are standing on the shoulders of one of the great leaders of this city, Dorothy Tillman, who laid the foundation and the groundwork to ignite a movement for reparations. It was Dorothy Tillman that introduced me to Dr. Claude Anderson, Black Labor, White Wealth. And it is why my administration is committed to driving reparations home. And we're going to invest $500,000 into the study of restoration and reparations for the city of Chicago so that we can begin to move in the direction of complete liberation. And that's why, with the help and the support of the Black Caucus, we have a brand new Office of Reentry, added $5 million to make sure that the formerly incarcerated find jobs and housing and counseling and the full support that they need.
Yeah, so this is the same cheap trick that Democrats pull in California around election time when they came out and they started to peddle reparations to black people. Okay, you guys remember all those town halls, all those meetings in California? You had San Francisco, LA, Sacramento, all these black people would come out and demand ridiculous amounts of money for reparations, right? We're talking about some people say, hey, black people should get $5 million each, right? $5 million a person. Okay. You have some proposals where they were saying that black people are owed 15 to 20 trillion dollars. Now, again, there are no concrete plans on how they're actually going to pay for it. Okay. That actually really matters. No. They just say, cut me the check. Okay. And Democrats flirt with cutting them the check, even though Democrats know they're never going to cut the check. Okay. And that is how they get these votes, because they want black people to believe that voting Democrat is your best chance of getting reparations. Therefore, they really don't have to do anything else or worry about anything else in regards to the black vote, because again, you're just dangling that carrot in front of them the whole time, and black people continue to jump for it every single time. Okay. And that, in my opinion, is part of the reason why black people vote Democrat at 85-90% is because Democrats promise handouts. Okay. And handouts are the easiest way to win the black vote. Okay, let me give you an example, right? I'm gonna give you an actual great example. This is something I have been extremely annoyed by, but again, there's this idea that, well, because Trump gave out stimulus checks, okay, during the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of black people are saying, well, Trump gave me money, right? Therefore, I'm gonna vote for Trump. And we've covered these stories, and we've covered black people who have like cited stimulus checks as one of the reasons, because they believed that the economy was great when Trump was giving out stimulus checks. And it's just funny because it really does back up my thesis about, again, how to win the black vote, right? The easiest way to do it. Because again, a lot of people, they say, well, when Trump was in office, we had money. And what they actually really mean is that you had all that government money out there, right? The PPP loans, okay, the EIDL loans, the stimulus checks, the unemployment. That is the first time as a society we've actually experienced that much government cash being just flooded into the populace, right? And now, lo and behold, Trump's black support has boosted. I mean, he's double support, okay? And I'm just saying, I don't think it's coincidence I really don't. And it's really a sad thing to say, but this is what I have noticed. So again, it doesn't surprise me when Democrats, all of a sudden when they're struggling, like Brandon Johnson, they're coming out here and they're dangling the reparations. Hey, we'll give you some reparations. And it's just not going to happen for a variety of reasons. We're going to go over them in a minute. But one of the reasons that a lot of people don't think about is the fact that, it could be likely, depending on how you try to implement reparations post affirmative action being overturned, that it's probably going to get struck down by the courts, okay? Because arguments are being made that it is a violation of the 14th Amendment, the Equal Protection Clause, in which, again, you're not supposed to have this type of racial discrimination, which is what this Chicago suburb of Evanston, which I think is famous for being, I think, the first town to formally actually give out cash reparations, right? Like actual money. They're now being sued because of it, because basically this is discrimination, right? According to the group that bought the lawsuit. So without further ado, let's get into it.
A Chicago suburb is facing a lawsuit for paying out reparations to its black residents. Evanston, Illinois became the first municipality in the U.S. to launch a government-funded reparations program. But a conservative group has filed a class action lawsuit claiming the program discriminates against non-black residents. For more on this, let's bring in Emmanuel Felton. He's a race and ethnicity reporter for the Washington Post who has been covering this story. What are the grounds for this lawsuit?
Yeah, so the conservative group Judicial Watch argues that this program discriminates against non-black residents of Evanston. So under Evanston's reparations program, if you lived in the city between 1919 and 1969, or you're the descendant of someone who did, and you're black, you qualify for reparations, because the argument is during those 50 years, Evanston instituted a bunch of racist, segregationist housing policies that deprive wealth from the black residents of town. So they're saying this is our effort to rebuild the wealth that we deprived from you. Whereas Judicial Watch says, you haven't proved exactly who was harmed by these policies. And so by opening it up to all black residents, you're discriminating against non-black residents.
Yeah, and that is an interesting argument, because what they're essentially saying is that you are not actually determining who was harmed by these policies. You are just saying that, well, if you're black and you lived in the city between a certain period of time, and therefore you're eligible, even though they have not demonstrated any harm or damage done to them by the policy, right? So it's not really reparations at that point, right? Because you're not really fixing a wrong. You're really just redistributing wealth. And that's ultimately what reparations is. It is wealth redistribution, right? That's ultimately the only way for it practically to be implemented. And because of that, that's also why there will always be strong arguments and lawsuits like this against it, because essentially it is extremely hard to determine who exactly was damaged and exactly how much is owed as a result, right? Depending on what you're giving reparations out for. Okay, even this city that tried to narrow it down to, a specific population, black people that lived in the city between a certain period of time, again, that's still not specific enough to qualify as something that is non-discriminatory. Okay, because again, you're just handing out money to people based off race and when they lived in the city, not based off if they were actually really harmed. And that is important because that's what makes it unconstitutional, okay, to just give out reparations based off race. Okay, that is a violation of the 14th Amendment, the Equal Protection Clause. Okay, the government cannot just hand out race-based remedies that are ageless when it comes to their reach into the past, which is essentially what slavery reparations is. Okay, it has to be some government discrimination that happened recently, okay, relatively recently, okay, not 250 years ago, right, or 150 years ago, okay, no, it has to be something that happened recently, and you have to actually prove that a group of people were harmed specifically because of a government policy, right? You have to actually prove that, okay? The government is not compelled to give out race-based remedies based off societal discrimination, okay? Societal discrimination and government discrimination are two different things. So I personally think that at the federal level, reparations is definitely not happening. At the state level, definitely not happening. The most that people can hope for is some little town like this to do reparations real quick, pass it real quick before it can get challenged in court, and then, you know, pass out the money, right? And say, hey, we'll deal with the policy being struck down later, because that's what's going to happen, right? I personally believe, based off established court precedents, that this is going to get struck down, right? Basically, any reparations proposal, any serious one, is going to get struck down by the courts. That's just the reality, which to me is funny, because I tell people the truth, right, about reparations, and I get called a sellout and all types of racial slurs. But yet you have people that lie to you about reparations, that will raise money, that will take money from people, knowing damn well that they're never going to get reparations. It's not going to happen. They'll take that money anyways, enrich themselves, and pretend to be some freedom fighter, while at the same time knowing that you're getting these people's hopes and dreams up for something that you know is not going to happen. All these people know that it is unconstitutional, but it's one of the biggest grifts on the internet. And I hate calling things grifts, right? But the reparations movement is a huge grift, okay? And one reason why I'm saying it is because if you're a black person, you say, hey, like, I just don't want to waste time with reparations because it's never going to happen. Again, people think that you're a sellout. But I'm actually telling you the truth, right? I'm not lying to you. I'm not trying to take advantage of this idea that one day you're going to become a millionaire because the government is going to give you a check, right, for something that you didn't go through. Again, these are the arguments being made. And quite honestly, these arguments have merit to them, right? If you just look at the Constitution, right, the 14th Amendment, the Equal Protection Clause, one of the reasons why is because, again, from a practical standpoint, the only way to really do reparations is actually through wealth redistribution. And that's actually what they really want. Okay. But again, that will always face legal roadblocks, in my opinion. And I think that is why you have these movements like the FBAs, the ADOS, because they want to try to get around that, right? They want to try to say, okay, no, we actually were harmed because we can prove that we are descendants of slaves who were harmed. And therefore, we should get a reparations check, right? We're trying to exclude everybody except the people that were actually harmed. Now, again, will that work? I personally do not think so, right? But you do have people out here that are trying to get people's hopes up that the government one day is going to give them that check that they're looking for, even though at the same time they're arguing that the society is run by white supremacists. And they believe that these white supremacists are going to eventually cut black people a check. And I'm not entirely sure why white supremacists would give a reparations check to a black person if they are a white supremacist. But hey, you know, what do I know? Okay, all I'm saying is that I personally think, as a truth teller, right, as somebody that actually going to keep it real with you, black people ultimately are going to have to be satisfied with the fact that we live in a country with a pretty good social safety net, right? In the sense that if black people have been harmed by slavery and Jim Crow, and that is still affecting black people today, it is the reason why black people are living in poverty or aren't getting ahead, then I would argue, well, wouldn't it make sense that if black people are at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder, they're earning less than everybody else because of discrimination and slavery and systemic racism? If this is the argument, then wouldn't they, by definition, disproportionately benefit from social safety net programs, which, again, we have plenty of them, right? Food stamps, welfare, okay? The fact that we have a social safety net, and as a portion of the population, black people are on these social safety nets more than any other racial group, while at the same time not contributing as much to the system, because again, by definition, they have less money to contribute to the system. Couldn't you argue that that benefit black people disproportionately more than everybody else? Okay, that's probably the closest thing that black people are going to get to reparations. And that's just keeping it real. That's me not getting your hopes up, right? That's not me selling you some dream, because I personally think it's just not going to happen. But hey, you can fight for it. I'm just saying, when you're still fighting 40, 50 years from now, I would have put my energy into something more productive, right? And probably at that point would have got my own reparations. Okay. I'm just saying, I think that's probably the most effective thing you can do. Okay. Take advantage of the fact that the government does not make you live in abject poverty, even if you don't work, right? Even if you don't contribute as much to the system, that you can benefit, okay, and still be able to feed yourself, and to feed yourself well, right? Very well, okay? And have a roof over your head, have your kids' expenses paid for, and things like that on the government dime. I think that that's all you can really ask for. I mean, I'm just saying, like, what more can you ask for? Realistically, okay? I know what you can ask for idealistically, $15-20 trillion, but it ain't happening, right? I'm just saying.
And this is really part of a larger wave of conservative challenges against programs that came up after George Floyd's murder, right?
It's not a conservative challenge. It's about equal rights, okay? Trying to frame it as conservative is their attempt to try to make it seem like conservatives are trying to take away black people's rights. No, what conservatives are trying to do is to enforce equal rights, like the actual definition of equal rights, which is to treat everybody equally. This should not be a conservative liberal thing, right? This should just be an American thing, okay? It is American to treat everybody the same regardless of their race, right? I'm just saying that should just be the American idea at this point, okay? Everybody gets treated the same no matter who you are. But apparently that is white supremacist ideology in 2024, even though just 100 years ago, the white supremacist ideology was to treat people differently based off race, which is what Democrats are trying to do today, while at the same time claiming to not be the party of Jim Crow, right? No, that was actually really the Republicans, okay? Except FDR. We like FDR, right? So therefore, we'll claim him just because it's convenient for us. But I'm just saying, Democrats, they were pro-segregation back in the day and discrimination, and they're pro-segregation and discrimination today. This is their specialty. This is what they specialize in the entire existence of their party. So why is it a surprise that they are still pushing it today? Hate and division is the foundation of the Democrat Party, guys. Right? This is why the party is so hateful and divisive. It makes sense.
You know, with the last year's Supreme Court decision in the affirmative action case, that the courts are very weary of these programs that give benefits to certain ethnic groups. And that's sort of having a clash with all of these programs, both in the government and in private sector. Like, you know, just recently this week, a program that was going to give Black women in Georgia who were starting businesses grants was struck down by an appellate court. So,
AKA a contract, which is illegal to do, right? They are doing something that is textbook racial discrimination. And this guy is trying to pretend like that's some type of tragedy because they don't get special rights to discriminate against white people. Amazing. It's so funny how in none of these news clips, they actually go through the reasoning, like the actual reasoning in depth for the lawsuit against these discriminatory policies.
There's sort of a clash here between, you know, how do we fix our age-old problems of racial discrimination in a way that really satisfies a federal judiciary that's really only interested in race-blind policy.
Easy. Don't racially discriminate, right? You want to stop racial discrimination? Don't racially discriminate. That's it. Because if you continue to racially discriminate, this is what's going to happen. This is exactly what's going to happen. I promise you, if it continues to go down this path. White people are experiencing overt racial discrimination, right? They're letting you know we are overtly discriminating against whites, okay? That's not a myth. That's not made up. This is what they're actually doing. They're being overt about it, okay? It's not a conspiracy. The problem with that is that in a few years, as the white population continues to decline, white people will eventually become a minority, at least considering the current track that things are. Maybe white people will turn it around, right? Maybe white people will turn it around. But I'm just saying, what will happen is that at that point, white people, in my opinion, will have a legitimate claim to say, hey, we were racially discriminated against. And this is the cause of, you know, our decline or, you know, the situation that we're in at the time, right? And they will use the exact same arguments that these people made. And then they will call for racial discrimination. Hey, in order to fix it, we need special rights and privileges, right? And it just will be a never-ending cycle. In order to stop the cycle, you quite literally have to just stop racially discriminating against people. That's how it works. Because once these people get the power that they want, right? They want the power to racially discriminate against whites. Why would they ever give it up? the assumption is that, well, they're going to use the power to get even with whites and then they'll stop. No, they're not going to stop, right? They're going to continue to accumulate power, right? That is just what it is. Just like if you give people reparations, they will come back asking for more years later saying, hey, well, you didn't pay me enough, right? Doesn't matter how much you give them. Once you give it to them one time, people will come back and ask for it again. They will demand it and say, no, you got to pay me more. You owe me more. It was not enough, right?
We'll see.
Do you think the city will fight this all the way? I mean, what are they vowing to do?
That's what they're saying. You know, they refuse to comment for the story, citing pending litigation, but they're saying they vehemently support this program. And they're looking to fight it all the way up. And, you know, it's a program that they're very proud of. Evanston is very proud of being the first in the nation to institute something like this. But when you're the first, you know, you open yourself up to challenges that, you know, hopefully, you know, if you're the second or third, you've learned from what didn't work for the first.
The people are at the center of this, who would be the recipients of reparations. What are they telling you about this legal fight?
Yeah, well, you know, it's already happened. So Evanston's already paid nearly 200 people $25,000 each. So this is something that is already changing lives in Evanston. The question is, for all the people who were, so essentially how it worked is they pulled like bingo balls. And so if you were later in the poll, you were later in the wait list. So there's still hundreds of people on this wait list. And the question is what it will mean for them. It's already changed, you know, from the people I've talked to. It's already, I don't know if it's 25,000 has changed their lives as much as it felt like a significant acknowledgement to them of the harm that was really caused here and across the country by housing policy for 50 years that, you know, really deprived Black folks for the ability to build wealth in the same way that white folks were able to with programs like the GI Bill and such.
Well, I mean, again, you know, you don't have to prove that you were actually harmed, right? They just assume that you were harmed because you were Black and you lived in the area. So I don't know, man. Maybe they will be able to narrow it down to continue to do it, right? Maybe they will, maybe they won't. I don't know. I just personally think that it is one of those things that is a waste of time, in my opinion, okay? I think that a lot of these programs are going to get shot down in the courts. And, hey, you know, you can keep trying, but I just think that there's a better use of your time. But let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.